I don't know how you got that boarding
listen
pass,
to
but you
me
need to move
right
now.
now.
This seat is not for people like you. The words cut through the hushed cabin of the Gulfstream G700 like a blade through silk. They were not whispered. They were not mumbled under breath. They were delivered with the full authority of a man who had spent 22 years believing his uniform made him untouchable.
This is highly
Captain
unusual.
Derek Hartwell stood in the narrow aisle, his broad shoulders blocking the soft morning light that filtered through the cabin windows. 4 gold stripes gleamed on his epaulettes. His jaw was set like granite, his eyes fixed on the woman in seat 1A, with the kind of contempt usually reserved for trespassers. The woman did not flinch. She sat perfectly still, her posture relaxed but not slouched. Her hands resting on a dog-eared paperback in her lap. She wore a simple navy tracksuit with no logos, no flash, and her hair was pulled back into an elegant bun at the nape of her neck. No jewelry adorned her fingers or wrists, no designer handbag sat at her feet, just a worn leather messenger bag, soft with age and use. To Captain Hartwell she was an anomaly, a glitch in the natural order of private aviation, a problem to be corrected. To the 127,000 people who would soon watch this moment unfold on a live stream, she was something else entirely. She was Adrienne Carlisle. And she did not just have a ticket to this flight. She owned the entire airline, the plane, and in approximately 14 minutes she would own what remained of Captain Derek Hartwell's career. But he did not know that yet. None of them did. What Captain Hartwell did not know, what he could not possibly have imagined as he stood there with his chest puffed out and his assumptions fully loaded, was that the woman he was trying to humiliate had authorized the purchase of this very aircraft, that the tail number painted on its fuselage N700CG bore her company's initials, that 3 weeks ago she had signed the papers that made Altitude Private Air a subsidiary of her global investment firm. He did not know that she had flown to Teterboro this morning specifically to test the culture of the company she had just acquired, that she had dressed down deliberately, stripped away every visible marker of wealth, and booked herself as an ordinary passenger to see how her employees treated people they perceived as less than. He did not know that he was failing that test spectacularly, and he certainly did not know that every word he spoke, every sneer he delivered, every assumption he made was being broadcast live to a growing audience that would soon include journalists, aviation regulators, and the kind of social media firestorm that ends careers in hours. All Captain Derek Hartwell knew was what his eyes told him. A black woman in a tracksuit was sitting in the premium seat of his aircraft, and that simply would not do. Before we dive into this story, I have to ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe that real power does not need a uniform to prove itself, hit that subscribe button and like this video, because what happens next will restore your faith in karma. Now let us rewind to how this moment started. 3 hours earlier at Teterboro Airport, when Adrienne Carlisle walked into a private aviation lounge and set into motion a chain of events that would expose the rot at the heart of an airline and change lives forever. This is the story of a woman who was told she did not belong. This is the story of the people who tried to remove her. And this is the story of what happens when you underestimate someone based on what they are wearing instead of who they are. 14 minutes. That is all the time Captain Hartwell had left. He just did not know it yet. The private aviation lounge at Teterboro Airport was less a room and more a carefully curated illusion. A temple dedicated to the proposition that wealth could insulate you from the ordinary inconveniences of travel. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the eastern wall, offering an unobstructed view of the tarmac, where multi-million-dollar aircraft sat gleaming under the early morning sun. Gulfstreams, Bombardiers, Dassauls. Each one a monument to the kind of success that most people only read about in magazines. The air inside the lounge smelled of dark roast coffee, freshly brewed and served in porcelain cups that probably cost more than a week's groceries for an average family. Subtle floral arrangements dotted the space orchids, mostly their exotic blooms, adding splashes of color to an otherwise muted palette of cream slate and brushed bronze. Leather armchairs were positioned at careful intervals, each one angled to provide privacy while still allowing its occupant to see and be seen. Because that was the real currency in rooms like this. Not just money, but visibility. Status. The silent acknowledgement that you had arrived literally and figuratively. It was 7:15 in the morning, and the lounge held only a handful of passengers waiting for their respective flights. In a plush armchair near the corner, positioned deliberately away from the main seating area, sat a woman who seemed almost designed to be overlooked. Adrienne Carlyle. To the casual observer, and there were several in the lounge that morning, she was unremarkable, perhaps even out of place. She wore no makeup. Her hair, natural and thick, was pulled back into a simple bun. Her outfit was a navy Loro Piana cashmere tracksuit, a set that retailed for more than most people's monthly mortgage payment, but it whispered its expense rather than shouting it. There were no logos, no visible price tags of status. On the floor beside her chair sat not a glittering Birkin bag or a logo-stamped designer suitcase, but a worn leather messenger bag, soft and creased from years of use. It had been with her since her first real business trip 23 years ago. She had never seen a reason to replace it. In her hands was a dog-eared paperback, a dense historical biography of Madam C.J. Walker, the first female self-made millionaire in American history. Adrienne had read it 4 times. She always found new lessons in its pages. She turned a page now, her eyes scanning the familiar words, but her attention was elsewhere. Her ears were tuned to the room around her, the conversations, the interactions, the small moments of human behavior that revealed so much more than any financial report ever could. Because Adrienne Carlyle was not here to relax. She was here to observe. 3 weeks ago, her company, Carlyle Global Holdings, had finalized the acquisition of Altitude Private Air for $312 million. On paper, it was a straightforward deal. Altitude had been bleeding money for 2 years, hemorrhaging clients to competitors, while its stock price circled the drain. The financials were a mess, but fixable. The fleet was solid. The routes were profitable in theory, but the real problem, Adrienne suspected, was not on the balance sheet. It was cultural. For months before the acquisition, her team had been monitoring anonymous complaints on industry forums and social media. Stories of passengers treated differently based on appearance. Flight crews who seemed more interested in impressing wealthy clients than providing consistent service. A culture of gatekeeping where certain staff members had appointed themselves arbiters of who belonged in private aviation and who did not. Adrienne had seen this before. In hotels, in restaurants, in boardrooms across the country. The assumption that wealth looked a certain way, that power wore a certain uniform, that a black woman in simple clothes must be lost confused, or worst of all, an imposter. She had built a $4 billion empire by being underestimated, by walking into rooms where people assumed she was the assistant, the caterer, the cleaning staff, and then signing the checks that paid their salaries. But she had never been content to simply succeed. She wanted to change things, to build companies where no one had to dress up just to be treated with basic respect, where character mattered more than clothing, where the rot of assumption and prejudice was exposed and eliminated root and branch. And so she had initiated what she privately called Project Shadow. She had booked herself as an ordinary one-way passenger on Altitude's flagship route New York to Los Angeles on their crown jewel aircraft, a Gulfstream G700 with the tail number N700CG. The plane she herself had authorized the purchase of 3 months before she even owned the company. The plane whose interior specifications she had personally approved, opting for sustainable materials, advanced air filtration, and a layout that prioritized quiet work zones over flashy displays of luxury. The crew had nicknamed it the Horizon. Adrian thought the name was fitting. Today she would see exactly what lay beyond it. Her goal was simple: to experience the airline as a regular passenger would, to see the rot for herself, to identify who among her new employees lived up to the values she demanded and who did not. She had told no one at altitude about her visit, not the CEO she had retained to manage day-to-day operations, not the board, not the crew assigned to today's flight. Her executive assistant, Tamara Knowles, was the only person who knew her location, and Tamara had been instructed to maintain radio silence unless Adrian initiated contact. This was a test. This, and so far the results were troubling. Across the lounge, Adrian had already identified the other passengers for her flight. A man and woman, both in their late 50s, who radiated the kind of aggressive, ostentatious wealth that she had always found exhausting. The woman wore a cream Chanel suit with diamond bracelets that caught the light every time she gestured, which was often. The man beside her, presumably her husband, had the perpetually worried expression of someone who had spent decades managing his wife's expectations and failing. Adrian discreetly pulled out her phone and typed a note into a locked file: passenger VP female, late 50s. High maintenance, status-driven, aggressive body language toward service staff. Flag for behavioral audit. She saved the note and returned to her book. The first phase of the audit was nearly complete. The real test was about to begin. At exactly 7:25 a.m., the energy in the lounge shifted. Adrian felt it before she saw it, a subtle change in the room's atmosphere, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. She did not look up from her book immediately. She had learned long ago that observation was most effective when it appeared accidental. Through her peripheral vision, she watched a man stride into the lounge. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of bearing that suggested he expected the world to make way for him. Silvering hair at his temples added an air of distinguished authority to features that were handsome in a conventional, forgettable way. His jaw could have been carved from granite. His posture was ramrod straight, shoulders back, chin slightly elevated. He wore the dark navy uniform of a commercial pilot, but the 4 gold stripes on his epaulets marked him as something more. A captain. The master of his domain. The unquestioned authority of whatever aircraft he commanded. His name tag, visible as he passed within 10 feet of Adrian's chair, read, Captain Derek Hartwell. Adrian typed another note into her phone, her fingers moving quickly. Captain D. Hartwell. Entered lounge 725. High presence, low approachability. Does not acknowledge service staff or passengers. Observe crew dynamics. She watched as Captain Hartwell walked directly to the service desk at the far end of the lounge. His back remained straight as a board. His eyes never wandered to the passengers he passed. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had performed this routine 1,000 times and saw no need to deviate from it. A young man in a service uniform, early 20s, Hispanic nervous smile, stepped forward with a tray bearing a glass of water. Captain Hartwell. Can I offer you? Hartwell did not break stride. He brushed past the young man as if he were furniture, not even acknowledging the offer with a glance, let alone a word. The service worker's smile faltered. He stepped back, tray still extended rejection written across his face. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She had seen this before, too. The casual cruelty of people who had forgotten or never learned that every person they encountered was a human being worthy of basic acknowledgement. The way power unchecked calcified into contempt. At the service desk, Hartwell spoke in a low, authoritative tone to the attendant. Adrian could not hear the words from her position, but she could read the body language. The attendant nodded repeatedly, deferential, almost servile. Hartwell gave a curt nod in return and turned. His eyes swept the lounge. They passed over Adrienne without pausing, without registering, without the slightest flicker of acknowledgement. But they stopped on the couple in the corner, the woman in Chanel with the diamond bracelets and her worried-looking husband. Something shifted in Hartwell's expression. The coldness thawed just slightly. A professional smile appeared, practiced and precise. He approached them. "Miss Pemberton, Mr. Pemberton, good morning. I trust everything is in order for your flight today." The woman. Pemberton apparently looked up from her phone with an expression that somehow managed to be both imperious and pleased. "Captain Hartwell, how lovely. Yes, we are looking forward to it. I trust our seating arrangements have been properly handled." There was something in the way she said properly handled that made Adrienne's instincts prickle. A subtext, an expectation. "Of course," Mrs. Pemberton Hartwell replied smoothly. "We will ensure your complete comfort, as always." As always, Mrs. Pemberton repeated her tone, suggesting that always had better mean exactly what she expected it to mean. Hartwell gave a small bow, an actual bow, and retreated toward the exit that led to the tarmac. He still had not looked at Adrienne. He still did not know she existed. Adrienne saved another note. Hartwell shows preferential behavior toward high-status passengers. Dismissive of service staff. Creates visible hierarchy in public spaces. Red flag. She closed her phone and returned to her book. But she was not reading anymore. She was waiting. 5 minutes later, the door to the lounge opened again. This time, the person who entered was neither commanding nor dismissive. She was nervous, visibly, almost painfully nervous, and trying very hard not to show it. Nicole Martinez was 26 years old, with warm brown skin and dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her uniform was the sleek grey of Altitude Private Air's brand, pressed and pristine. Her name tag was perfectly straight. Her shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Everything about her appearance said, "I am trying. I am professional. I belong here." But her eyes told a different story. They darted around the lounge with the barely concealed anxiety of someone who had not quite figured out if she was swimming or drowning. She had been with Altitude for 10 months, long enough to learn the routines, not long enough to feel comfortable with the clientele. Nicole straightened her spine, fixed a bright smile on her face, and stepped forward. "Good morning, passengers for Flight 4441 to Los Angeles. I am Nicole, and I will be your in-flight attendant today. We will be ready to board in approximately 5 minutes." Her voice was clear and professional, but there was a brittleness beneath the brightness, the sound of someone performing competence rather than feeling it. Mrs. Pemberton did not look up from her phone. "Is my seat confirmed? The window with the extra legroom?" "Yes, Mrs. Pemberton. All seating has been pre-confirmed according to the manifest. We are looking forward to having you aboard." Mrs. Pemberton made a sound something between a sniff and a sigh that communicated profound dissatisfaction without using any actual words. "We will see." Nicole's smile flickered but held. "Is there anything I can get you before we board? Water, coffee? I will wait for the good coffee on the plane." "Of course. Please let me know if you need anything." Nicole retreated her smile, still fixed in place, and made her way around the lounge to check on the other passengers. She stopped near Adrienne's chair. "Good morning. Can I get you anything before we board?" Adrienne looked up from her book meeting. Nicole's eyes directly. The young woman seemed startled by the attention, startled Adrienne realized by the simple act of being looked at as a person rather than a servant. "I am fine, thank you, Nicole. Beautiful morning for a flight." Nicole blinked. Her smile, which had been a professional mask, softened into something genuine. "It really is," she said, and for a moment she sounded like a human being rather than an employee reciting lines. Adrian gave her a small, warm smile in return. "I am sure it will be a good flight." Nicole nodded, seeming uncertain how to respond to kindness, and moved on. Adrian watched her go. Nicole Martinez, she thought. Remember this one? Because in the quiet moments, in the small interactions that no one else noticed, character revealed itself. And Nicole Martinez, despite her nerves, had character. The question was whether she would have the courage to show it when the pressure came. As Adrian closed her book and prepared to stand, a memory surfaced, unbidden but familiar. It rose up from the depths of her past like a whale breaching the surface of a calm sea, demanding attention. She had been trying not to think about Atlanta. She always tried not to think about Atlanta. But rooms like this, one temples of wealth and exclusion, had a way of dragging her back to the day everything changed. 25 years earlier. Atlanta, Georgia, 1999. Adrian Carlisle was 22 years old, fresh out of Howard University, with a degree in finance and a fire in her belly that no amount of rejection could extinguish. She sat in the waiting room of First Regional Bank, a manila folder clutched in her hands. Inside that folder was her future, or so she hoped. A business plan meticulously researched and carefully written. Financial projections, market analysis, everything a bank would need to see before extending a small business loan. She was wearing her best outfit, a sharp navy blazer she had found at a consignment shop, pressed grey slacks and low heels that pinched her feet but made her feel professional. Her hair was straightened and pulled back. Her makeup was subtle and precise. She had rehearsed her pitch 100 times. In the mirror, in the shower, walking to class. She knew her numbers cold. She knew her market. She knew with the unshakable confidence of youth that her idea was good. A small logistics consulting firm specializing in supply chain optimization for regional businesses. Nothing glamorous, nothing revolutionary. Just a solid service that filled a real need. All she needed was $15,000 to get started. Miss Carlisle. She stood smoothing her blazer and followed the receptionist to a corner office. The loan officer was a white man in his 50s with thinning hair and a paunch that strained against his dress shirt. His name was Gerald Hoffman. He had been with the bank for 23 years. His desk was covered with family photos and golf trophies. He did not stand when she entered. He did not offer his hand. He just looked at her blazer and her folder and her carefully applied lipstick, and something shifted in his expression. A closing, a dismissal, a judgment rendered before a single word was spoken. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Adrian sat. She placed her folder on her lap. She smiled professionally. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Hoffman. I am here to discuss a small business loan for—" "I have looked over your application," he interrupted, not looking at her. He was shuffling papers on his desk, his attention clearly elsewhere. "I have to be honest with you, Miss Carlisle." He finally looked up. His eyes were flat. Uninterested. This neighborhood, your background, the numbers just do not support this kind of risk. Adrian felt her stomach drop, but she kept her face neutral. "I would be happy to walk you through the projections, sir. The market research shows—" "I am sure it does." He slid her folder back across the desk without opening it, without even glancing at the cover page. "But we have to be realistic here. This bank has a responsibility to its shareholders. We cannot extend credit to every hopeful who walks through the door." The pause before hopeful was deliberate. The word itself was a replacement for something else, something uglier. Adrian understood. She had understood from the moment she walked in, and he did not stand. "What would you suggest?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. Gerald Hoffman leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over his paunch. "There is a temp agency down the street. They are always hiring. Good way to build up some savings, get some experience. Maybe in a few years, when you have a more established track record, you can try again." He smiled. It was the smile of a man who believed he was being helpful, who believed he was doing her a favor by crushing her dreams before they could disappoint her. Adrienne looked at him for a long moment. She could have argued, could have demanded he review her projections, could have pointed out that her credit score was excellent, that her plan was solid, that she had worked harder to get into this room than he had worked in a decade. But she had learned something in her 22 years. Something her grandmother had taught her back in Detroit when Adrienne was 12 and crying over a teacher who had called her surprisingly articulate. "Baby girl," her grandmother had said, "some people cannot see past their own blindness. Do not waste your energy trying to open eyes that choose to stay closed. Just keep building, keep rising. And one day you will be so high up that their opinions will not even reach you." Adrienne stood. She picked up her folder. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Hoffman." He nodded, already reaching for his phone, already forgetting her. She walked out of his office with her head high. She did not cry until she reached her car. That night, Adrienne drove across town to her grandmother's house, a small brick bungalow that had been in the family for 3 generations. Her grandmother, Eleanor Carlyle, was 78 years old. She had worked as a seamstress for 40 years, then as a cleaning woman for 15 more. She had never made more than $20,000 in a single year of her life. But she had savings. Adrienne had not come to ask for money. She had come for comfort, for the steady reassurance of the woman who had raised her after her parents' accident. But Eleanor had other ideas. "How much do you need?" she asked after Adrienne had finished explaining what had happened. "Grandma, I cannot." "How much? 15,000. "But Grandma, that is your—" "I know exactly what it is." Eleanor rose from her chair slowly, her joints protesting, and walked to the bedroom. She returned with a checkbook that looked like it had not been touched in years. "This is my life savings," she said, writing out the amount in careful, deliberate strokes. "Every extra dollar I had for 50 years, I was saving it for your education, but Howard gave you that scholarship, so I kept saving. Did not know what for. Now I do. Grandma, listen to me, baby girl." Eleanor tore the check from the book and pressed it into Adrienne's hands. "That man at the bank. He is going to live his whole life in that little office, making little decisions, feeling like a big man because he gets to say no to people with dreams. That is his ceiling. That is as high as he will ever climb." She cupped Adrienne's face in her weathered hands. "But you do not have a ceiling. You have got wings. And one day, baby girl, you are going to fly so high that when you look down, you will not even be able to see men like Gerald Hoffman. They will just be specks. Dust. Nothing." Adrienne's tears were falling freely now, but she was smiling. "What if I fail? Then you fail. And you try again. And you keep trying until you do not fail anymore. That is what we do. That is what we have always done." Adrienne did not fail. She started her company from her apartment, working 18-hour days, living on ramen and determination. Within 3 years, she had 10 employees. Within 5, she had 50. Within 10, she had offices in 6 cities and a valuation that made venture capitalists sit up and pay attention. And exactly 1 decade after Gerald Hoffman told her to try the temp agency, Adrienne Carlyle purchased First Regional Bank. She did not fire Gerald. That would have been too easy, too petty. Instead, she called him into a conference room. She sat at the head of the table, the same table where the bank's board had just voted to accept her acquisition offer. And she slid a folder across the polished wood. "Do you remember me, Mr. Hoffman?" He was 59 now. Grayer, smaller. His paunch had grown. His confidence had not. He looked at her face, then at the folder, then back at her face. The color drained from his cheeks. 10 years ago, you told me I should try the temp agency down the street. You told me this bank could not take a risk on someone with my background. She opened the folder. Inside was her original business plan, the one he had never bothered to read, and the acquisition documents he had just signed. I want you to know that I am not firing you. I believe in second chances, but I am restructuring your role. You will be working in our community lending division, helping first-generation entrepreneurs access the capital they need to build their dreams. She stood. Consider it an opportunity to learn something, to grow. Maybe in a few years you will have a more established track record in treating people with dignity. She walked out of the room without looking back. Gerald Hoffman retired 6 months later. Now, 25 years after that day in Atlanta, Adrienne Carlisle was worth $4.2 billion. She had built an empire that spanned real estate technology, media, and aviation. She had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. She had shaken hands with presidents and prime ministers, but she still carried that worn leather messenger bag. She still read about Madam C.J. Walker, and she still remembered what it felt like to be dismissed before anyone bothered to learn her name. Some lessons you never forgot, some lessons you used to change the world. Adrienne stood stretching her back and prepared to board her aircraft. The real test was about to begin. The tarmac at Teterboro was sharp with the smell of jet fuel and ambition. Adrienne followed the other passengers out of the lounge and into the morning air, her worn messenger bag slung over one shoulder. The sun was climbing now, painting the eastern sky in shades of gold and amber, and the aircraft waiting for them gleamed like a jewel in its light. The horizon. She had approved its purchase 8 months ago before the acquisition was even finalized. A Gulfstream G778 $1 million of engineering excellence with a range of 7,500 nautical miles and a cruise speed of Mach 0.925. It could fly from New York to Tokyo without refueling. It could seat up to 19 passengers in comfort that most people could not imagine. Adrienne had imagined it. She had specified it. She had insisted on sustainable materials and advanced air filtration and a cabin layout that prioritized quiet functionality over flashy displays of luxury. The tail number N700CG glinted in the sunlight, her company's initials painted in gold on white, a signature that most people would not recognize, but that meant everything to her. This was her plane. These were her employees, and today she would see if they deserved to carry her company's name. Nicole Martinez stood at the top of the air stairs, her bright smile firmly in place, greeting passengers as they boarded. Mrs. Pemberton was first naturally. She swept up the stairs with the practiced grace of someone who expected the world to arrange itself around her convenience, her heels clicking against the metal steps, her diamond bracelets catching the light. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Pemberton," Nicole said warmly. Mrs. Pemberton responded with a single syllable, She swept past Nicole and into the cabin without another word. Mr. Pemberton followed his worried expression intact, offering Nicole an apologetic half-smile that seemed to acknowledge his wife's rudeness without quite excusing it. "Thank you," he murmured, and disappeared into the plane. Adrienne was next. She climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately, giving Nicole time to see her. To really see her. To form whatever impression she was going to form. Nicole's smile did not falter. If anything, it warmed slightly. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carlisle. Your seat is 1A, just to the right." "Thank you, Nicole. It is a beautiful morning for a flight." Again, that flicker of surprise in the young woman's eyes. The startle of being addressed by name, of being treated as a person rather than a piece of furniture. "It really is," Nicole said, and her smile became genuine. "Real. I hope you have a wonderful flight." I am sure I will. Adrian stepped into the cabin and felt, as she always did, a small flutter of pride. The interior was exactly as she had envisioned. Muted tones, cream slate brushed bronze that whispered luxury without screaming it. 4 plush captain's chairs in the main cabin, arranged 2 facing 2 with enough space between them for privacy and comfort. A separate rear compartment with a divan for sleeping and a small conference table for working. And at the front, positioned for maximum privacy, with its own partition and the largest window on the plane seat 1A. Her seat. The one she had specifically requested when she had her executive assistant book her under her own name, without any titles or corporate identifiers. Just A. Carlyle. Just another passenger on just another flight. She settled into the buttery leather, stowing her messenger bag beneath the seat ahead of her, and pulled out her paperback. The biography of Madam C.J. Walker fell open to the page she had dog-eared, and she began to read. Behind her she could hear the Pembertons getting settled. Mrs. Pemberton's voice carried even when she was trying to whisper, or perhaps especially when she was trying to whisper. "This is fine, Arthur. Fine. But look at that seat." Adrian did not turn around. She did not need to. She knew exactly which seat Mrs. Pemberton was looking at. "Dear, it is just a seat. It is the premium seat, Arthur. The one I should have been offered. And instead they gave it to—" A pause. Heavy. Deliberate. Well, never mind. Adrian turned a page in her book. The familiar cold stillness settled over her. The same stillness she had felt in Gerald Hoffman's office 25 years ago. The same stillness she had felt in 1,000 rooms since when people looked at her and saw only what they expected to see. She had learned to welcome that stillness. It meant the test had begun. The cabin of the Gulfstream G700 was a marvel of modern engineering, a pressurized cocoon of luxury designed to insulate its occupants from the minor inconveniences of hurtling through the atmosphere at 600 miles per hour. But no amount of engineering could insulate Adrienne Carlyle from the whispers behind her. Mrs. Pemberton was not a subtle woman. Her voice, even when lowered, had a carrying quality that seemed almost deliberate, as if she wanted to be overheard, wanted her opinions to permeate the space around her like an expensive perfume. "Arthur. Arthur, are you seeing this? I see the cabin, dear. It is very nice. Not the cabin. That woman in my seat." Adrienne kept her eyes on her book. She had read the same sentence 3 times now, but she did not turn the page. She was listening, observing, cataloguing. "It is not your seat, Victoria. Our seats are 2A and 2B. That is what we booked. That is what we ended up with. But that seat 1A, that is the premium solo seat. The best seat on the plane. I should have been offered that seat first. I am a platinum client, Arthur. Do you understand what that means? I understand what you tell me. It means dear. It means preferential treatment. It means they are supposed to anticipate my needs, and instead they have given the best seat to—" Victoria Pemberton's voice dropped slightly, but not enough. Not nearly enough. "To someone who looks like she won a raffle." Adrienne's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on her paperback. "Victoria, please. Do not Victoria please me, Arthur. Look at her. A tracksuit. No jewelry. That bag looks like something from a thrift store. How did she even get through the Teterboro lounge? Security must be slipping. Or maybe she is someone's assistant traveling on a corporate perk. Either way, she does not belong in 1A. There it was. The phrase that Adrienne had heard in one form or another 1,000 times in her life. She does not belong. It had been said about her in bank lobbies and country clubs and corporate boardrooms. It had been implied by security guards who followed her through department stores and hotel managers who asked if she was waiting for someone. It had been communicated through raised eyebrows and pointed silences, and the subtle repositioning of bodies to block her path. She does not belong, as if belonging were something determined by appearance rather than achievement, as if the right to occupy space were granted by clothing rather than character, as if Victoria Pemberton, a woman whose greatest accomplishment appeared to be marrying a man with money, had the authority to decide who was worthy of sitting in which seat on an aircraft she did not own. The irony was so thick that Adrienne could have choked on it, but she did not choke. She did not react. She simply turned a page in her book, a page she had not read, and continued to listen. "What do you want me to do?" Victoria asked her to move. "Do not be ridiculous. That would be gauche. I want the crew to handle it. That is what they are paid for. That is what preferential treatment means. They should recognize that I am a more valuable client than some random woman who wandered in off the street. She has a boarding pass, dear. She is not random. Everyone has a boarding pass, Arthur. That does not mean they all belong in first class." Adrienne made a mental note. Later, when this was over, she would review the client records for Victoria and Arthur Pemberton. She would examine their booking history, their complaints, their interactions with staff. She would determine exactly how platinum their status really was, and whether it justified the attitude that Victoria seemed to believe it entitled her to. But that was for later. Right now, she had a role to play, a test to conduct. She continued to read her book. The tension in the cabin was building like pressure in a sealed container. Victoria Pemberton shifted in her seat, her diamond bracelets clicking against the armrest. She was staring at the back of Adrienne's head with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, would have been uncomfortable for anyone who did not have Adrienne's years of practice in ignoring contempt. "I am going to say something," Victoria announced. "Please do not." Arthur murmured. "Someone has to. This is unacceptable. We pay a premium for this service. We deserve to be treated accordingly. We are being treated accordingly. We have seats. We are on the plane. What more do you want? I want what I am entitled to. Arthur, is that so difficult to understand?" Adrienne turned another page. The book in her hands was becoming a prop at this point, a shield to hide behind, while she absorbed every word, every tone, every nuance of the conversation happening behind her. She had learned long ago that people revealed their true selves when they thought no one important was listening. Victoria Pemberton clearly thought no one important was listening. She was wrong. "Fine," Victoria said. Finally, her voice sharp with decision. "If you will not do anything, I will." Adrienne heard the rustle of movement, the click of a seatbelt being unbuckled, the soft pad of expensive heels on the cabin carpet. Victoria Pemberton was on the move, but she was not heading toward Adrienne. She was heading toward the call button. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. Adrienne heard Nicole's voice a moment later, professional and warm. "Yes, Mrs. Pemberton. How can I help you?" "You can start by explaining something to me, Nicole." The young flight attendant's voice remained steady, but Adrienne could hear the undercurrent of tension beneath it, the sound of someone bracing for impact. "Of course. What would you like to know?" Victoria's response was delivered at a volume that guaranteed everyone in the cabin could hear. "I would like to know why that woman, the word was loaded with disdain, is sitting in seat 1A, while I, a platinum member, am in 2B. There was a pause. Adrienne could picture Nicole's face, the professional mask holding firm, while her eyes darted, calculating the safest response to an unsafe question. "Mrs. Pemberton, all seats are assigned according to the booking manifest. Miss Carlyle's reservation was confirmed by corporate. I can assure you that all seating arrangements are—" Corporate Victoria interrupted, her tone dripping with skepticism. "Please, look at her, a tracksuit, a backpack. No one dressed like that books the premium seat on a private charter. Either someone made a mistake or she is using someone else's boarding pass. I can assure you, Mrs. Pemberton, that Miss Carlyle's booking is valid. If there is anything else I can... Get me the captain." The words landed like a slap. "I am sorry, the captain. Get him. Now. This is unacceptable, and I want to speak to someone with actual authority." Another pause. Longer this time. Adrienne could feel the weight of Nicole's dilemma pressing against the cabin air. The young flight attendant was caught between two competing pressures. The customer is always right mandate that private aviation was built on, and the basic human decency that told her Victoria Pemberton's demand was wrong. Adrienne waited. This was the test. Not just for Nicole, but for everyone on this aircraft. I will see if Captain Hartwell is available," Nicole said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "Please remain in your seat, Mrs. Pemberton. I will be right back." The soft footsteps retreated toward the cockpit. Victoria returned to her seat with the satisfied air of a general who had just ordered a decisive strike. "There," she said to Arthur. "That is how you handle these situations. You go to the top. You demand what you deserve." Arthur said nothing. Adrienne turned another page. The cold stillness inside her had crystallized into something harder, something patient, something that had been forged in 1,000 rooms like this one, where people like Victoria Pemberton assumed that their opinions were facts and their prejudices were principles. The test was escalating, and Adrienne was very, very interested to see what happened next. Nicole Martinez's hands were trembling as she made her way to the galley. She had been working in private aviation for 10 months, long enough to learn the rhythms of the job, the expectations of the clientele, the unspoken rules that governed interactions between crew and passengers. She had dealt with demanding clients before, unreasonable requests, last-minute changes, the casual assumption that because they were paying a premium, the laws of physics and common courtesy should bend to their will. But this was different. This was not a client asking for a better champagne or complaining about the temperature. This was a client demanding that another passenger be questioned, be challenged, because of how she looked. Nicole had seen the woman in 1A. Miss Carlyle, according to the manifest. She had seemed perfectly pleasant, polite. She had addressed Nicole by name, which happened so rarely that it stood out like a beacon in the fog of routine interactions. She had looked normal, comfortable, like someone who knew exactly where she was supposed to be and felt no need to prove it. But Victoria Pemberton had looked at that same woman and seen something else entirely, something threatening, something wrong. Nicole knew what that something was. She had grown up in El Paso, Texas, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who had spent their lives being looked at like something wrong, who had been questioned at borders and followed in stores and told to go back where they came from by people who could not see past the color of their skin. She knew that look. She knew what it meant. And she knew that what Mrs. Pemberton was asking her to do was wrong. But she also knew that her job was to serve the passengers, to keep them happy, to avoid confrontation, de-escalate tension, and make sure everyone had a pleasant flight experience. And Mrs. Pemberton had asked for the captain. Nicole's hands were still trembling as she knocked softly on the cockpit door. Captain Derek Hartwell looked up from his pre-flight checklist with an expression of mild irritation. "What is it?" Nicole swallowed. Her mouth was dry. "Captain Mrs. Pemberton would like to speak with you. She has concerns about the seating arrangements." Hartwell's eyebrows rose slightly. "Seating arrangements? What kind of concerns she is?" "She is unhappy that another passenger is in seat 1A. She feels that as a platinum member she should have been offered that seat first." Something shifted in Hartwell's expression. A flicker of interest, where there had been only annoyance. "Who is in 1A? A Miss Carlyle, sir. Her booking came through corporate." "Corporate?" Hartwell frowned. What does that mean? I am not sure, sir. It just shows as a corporate booking in the system. No additional details. Hartwell was silent for a moment, processing. Then he unbuckled his harness and stood straightening his uniform with practiced precision. "I will handle this," he said. "Stay here and finish the pre-flight with Shaw." "Sir, I said I will handle it, Martinez." Nicole stepped aside as Hartwell brushed past her his shoulder, nearly clipping hers in the narrow doorway. He did not apologize. He did not acknowledge the contact at all. She watched him stride into the cabin, his bearing ramrod straight, his expression set in the confident lines of a man who believed he was about to solve a problem. Her stomach twisted. She should say something. Should tell him that the booking was valid, that Miss Carlyle had every right to her seat, that this whole situation felt wrong in a way she could not quite articulate. But she was a junior attendant. 10 months on the job. No authority, no leverage, no voice that anyone in this company would listen to. So she stayed silent, and she watched, and she prayed that Captain Hartwell would handle things better than she feared he would. In the cabin, Victoria Pemberton's face lit up as she saw the captain approach. "Captain Hartwell, thank you for coming. I knew you would understand." Hartwell stopped beside her seat, his back to Adrienne, his full attention focused on the Pembertons. "Mrs. Pemberton, I understand there is a concern about seating." "There certainly is." Victoria's voice dropped to what she probably imagined was a confidential whisper, but which carried clearly through the quiet cabin. "That woman in 1A, she does not seem like someone who belongs in the premium seat, if you understand my meaning." Hartwell nodded slowly. "I understand completely, Mrs. Pemberton." He turned, and for the first time, Captain Derek Hartwell looked directly at Adrienne Carlyle. His eyes traveled over her tracksuit, her simple bun, her worn messenger bag, her dog-eared paperback. He took in every detail, cataloguing them, weighing them against some internal standard of what a premium passenger should look like. Adrienne looked up from her book and met his gaze. She did not smile. She did not frown. She simply looked at him with the calm, steady patience of someone who had been looked at this way 1,000 times before. Something flickered in Hartwell's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at her composure, or uncertainty at the lack of deference in her eyes, or maybe just the recalibration of a man adjusting his assumptions in real time, fitting the woman in front of him into a narrative that made sense to his worldview. He straightened his shoulders. "I will handle this," he said, loud enough for Victoria to hear. He stepped forward, positioning himself in the aisle beside seat 1A, and looked down at Adrienne with an expression of professional concern that did not quite reach his eyes. "Excuse me." Miss Adrienne lowered her book. "Yes, there seems to be a seating discrepancy. May I see your boarding pass?" Adrienne reached into her messenger bag with the same unhurried calm that had defined every moment of this morning. She pulled out her boarding pass, a simple piece of paper printed on standard stock with no special markings or VIP indicators, and handed it to Captain Hartwell. He took it with 2 fingers, holding it at arm's length, as if he expected it to confess something incriminating. Seat 1A, Carlisle A. Flight 441. Teb to LAX, altitude private air. His brow furrowed. The pass was legitimate. The seat assignment was clear. There was no mistake, no fraud, no clerical error to latch onto. But Captain Derek Hartwell had spent 22 years in the cockpit. He had flown titans of industry and Hollywood celebrities and politicians, whose names appeared in history books. He knew what a premium passenger looked like. And this woman did not fit the profile. "Miss Carlyle," he said slowly, turning the name over in his mouth like an unfamiliar taste. "This booking shows as a corporate reservation. Can you tell me who arranged your travel?" Adrienne's expression remained neutral. "My travel was arranged through my office. Is there a problem with my seat?" "Not with the seat itself, no. but we have had some concerns raised about the seating arrangement. What kind of concerns behind Hartwell? Victoria Pemberton shifted in her seat, leaning forward to watch the exchange with undisguised interest. Security concerns. Hartwell said, his voice dropping into a lower register, more authoritative, more final. In my experience, certain booking patterns can indicate irregularities. It is my responsibility as captain to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers aboard this aircraft. Adrian tilted her head slightly. Irregularities. Can you be more specific? Hartwell's jaw tightened. He had expected her to fold, to apologize, to accommodate, to accept his authority without question. That is what happened in his experience. You pushed gently but firmly, and people moved. They always moved, especially people who did not belong. But this woman was not moving. She was sitting perfectly still, her book resting in her lap, her eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that made him want to look away. I am asking you to relocate to the rear cabin, he said more firmly now, for security reasons. What specific security reason requires me to change seats? I am not at liberty to discuss the details, Miss Carlyle, but as captain of this aircraft, I have full authority over seating arrangements when safety is a concern. I am asking you politely to move to the rear compartment. Adrienne was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and utterly implacable. My boarding pass says 1A. I paid for 1A. I am not moving. The temperature in the cabin dropped several degrees. Victoria Pemberton made a sound of indignation, a sharp intake of breath, a rustling of silk as she sat up straighter. Captain, are you going to allow this? Hartwell held up a hand without turning around. His eyes remained fixed on Adrienne. Miss Carlyle, I do not think you understand the situation. I am the captain of this aircraft. My word is law once those doors close. If I determine that a passenger poses a safety concern, I have the authority and the responsibility to act. And what safety concern do I pose specifically? That is not something I can discuss publicly, because there is not one. You are fabricating a security issue to justify moving me because Mrs. Pemberton complained about my appearance. Hartwell's face flushed red. Behind him, Victoria Pemberton's voice cut through the silence like a blade. How dare you? Captain, this is exactly what I was talking about. This attitude. This entitlement. She waltzes onto a private aircraft dressed like she is going to a gym and then refuses to cooperate with basic security protocols. This is exactly why standards are slipping in this industry. Adrienne did not look at Victoria. Her eyes remained on Hartwell. Is that what this is about? My clothing. This is about security, Hartwell repeated, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. You keep saying that word. Security. But you have not identified a single specific concern. You have looked at my tracksuit and my bag, and you have made an assumption. That is not security. That is profiling. The word hung in the air between them. Profiling. It was a word with weight, a word with consequences, a word that if spoken loudly enough and often enough could end careers and trigger investigations and bring entire companies to their knees. Hartwell knew this, and for a brief moment, a flicker of hesitation that passed across his face like a cloud across the sun, he seemed to reconsider. But Victoria Pemberton was watching. The Pembertons were platinum clients. They represented exactly the kind of passenger that altitude private air was built to serve, wealthy, connected, demanding. If he backed down now, if he let some woman in a tracksuit defy his authority, what would that say about him, about the airline, about the natural order of things? His spine stiffened, his jaw set. Miss Carlyle, I have been flying these jets for 22 years. I know exactly who belongs in the premium cabin and who does not. He leaned closer. his voice dropping to a low, hard tone that was meant to intimidate. "And frankly, you do not fit the profile." Adrian's expression did not change. "And what profile is that?" Captain Hartwell's face was very close to hers now, close enough that she could see the slight tremor in his cheek, the tension in his jaw, the calculation in his eyes. "You know exactly what I mean," he said. "Now move to the rear cabin or I will have security escort you off this aircraft before we even leave the ground." The silence that followed was absolute. In that silence, Adrian made a decision. She had gathered enough evidence, enough to terminate Captain Hartwell, enough to ban Victoria Pemberton from the airline, enough to justify a complete overhaul of Altitude's culture and training programs. But she was not done. Not yet. Because people like Derek Hartwell did not just wake up one morning and decide to discriminate. They developed their prejudices over years, reinforced by a culture that rewarded bias and punished those who spoke against it. They rose through the ranks because the people above them saw their behavior and said nothing, or worse, approved. Captain Hartwell was a symptom. Adrian wanted to expose the disease. "I am not moving," she said quietly. "Not until you explain clearly and specifically what security concern requires me to change seats." Hartwell's hand came up, pointing toward the rear of the cabin. "I do not know how you got that boarding pass. I do not know who you think you are, but you need to move. Now. This seat is not for people like you." The words rang through the cabin like a gunshot. "This seat is not for people like you." Victoria Pemberton smiled in triumph. Arthur Pemberton stared at the floor. Nicole Martinez, standing frozen in the galley doorway, pressed a hand to her mouth. And Adrian Carlyle sat perfectly still, absorbing the impact of words that should have hurt, that would have hurt once long ago, and felt only the cold, crystalline clarity of certainty. The test was complete. Captain Derek Hartwell had failed. Now came the consequences. The cabin of the Gulfstream G700 had become a pressure cooker. Captain Hartwell stood in the aisle, his hand still raised, his finger pointing toward the rear cabin like a weapon. His face was flushed with a combination of anger and something else, something that might have been fear if men like Derek Hartwell ever admitted to feeling fear. Adrienne remained seated, her book resting forgotten in her lap, her eyes fixed on the captain's face with an expression of perfect, implacable calm. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut, vibrating with tension that everyone in the cabin could feel, but no one could name. Victoria Pemberton broke it. Finally, she breathed loud enough to carry. "Some proper protocol. Arthur, you see, I told you this airline knows how to handle these situations." Standards. That is what separates private aviation from commercial. She said commercial the way some people said sewage. Arthur Pemberton did not respond. He had pulled out his phone and was studying it with intense concentration, as if the device contained the secrets of avoiding marital confrontation. Captain Hartwell's hand lowered slowly. His eyes had not left Adrienne's face. "This is your final warning, Miss Carlyle. I am giving you one last opportunity to comply with my instructions before I escalate this situation. Move to the rear cabin, now." Adrienne's voice was quiet, but it carried. "And if I do not, then I will have no choice but to contact ground security and have you removed from this aircraft." For what cause failure to comply with crew instructions? Disruptive behavior, creating an unsafe environment for other passengers. I have not moved from my seat. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened anyone. In what way have I been disruptive? Hartwell's jaw worked silently for a moment. Your refusal to cooperate is disruption enough. My refusal to give up a seat I paid for to comply with an order that has no legitimate basis is not disruption. It is standing my ground. Standing your ground. Hartwell repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Is that what you call it? Because from where I am standing, it looks like someone who does not understand how things work in this industry. This is not a Greyhound bus, Miss Carlyle. This is private aviation. There are expectations, standards, and frankly, he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper that somehow seemed louder than shouting. You do not meet them. Adrienne tilted her head slightly. Standards based on what exactly? My clothing, my bag, the color of my skin. Hartwell's face went pale, then red again. I never said anything about... You did not have to. You said this seat is not for people like me. You said I do not fit the profile. You said I do not meet the standards. What standards, Captain? What profile? What kind of people am I? The questions hung in the air unanswerable without saying the quiet part out loud. Victoria Pemberton's voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. Oh, for heaven's sake. This is exactly the problem with giving these people access to spaces they do not understand. They turn everything into a racial grievance. Captain, just have security remove her. We do not have time for this nonsense. These people. Adrienne heard the phrase and felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not anymore, but something harder. Something that had been forged over decades of being called these people, and people like you, and surprisingly articulate, and 1,000 other phrases designed to remind her that no matter how far she climbed, someone would always be waiting to tell her she did not belong. She had spent her whole life proving them wrong. Today she would do it again. But not yet. Not until the moment was right. Captain Hartwell. She said, her voice still perfectly calm. I want to be absolutely clear about what is happening here. You are threatening to remove a passenger from an aircraft based on no legitimate security concern, no policy violation, and no justification beyond your own assumptions about what I should look like. If you proceed with this course of action, there will be consequences. Hartwell laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Consequences from you? You are threatening me. Lady, I do not know who you think you are, but I have got 22 years of experience and a spotless record. You are nobody, and in about 5 minutes you are going to be nobody standing on the tarmac watching this plane take off without you. He straightened, pulling out his radio. Teterboro ground, this is Captain Hartwell on N700CG. We have a passenger situation. Requesting security escort at Gate 7 for removal of a non-compliant passenger. Copy. The radio crackled. Copy N700CG. Security en route. 3 minutes. Hartwell holstered the radio with the satisfied air of a man who believed he had won. 3 minutes, he said. I suggest you use them to gather your belongings. Adrienne did not move. In the galley, Nicole Martinez stood frozen. Her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She had watched the entire confrontation unfold through the narrow doorway, unable to look away, unable to intervene. Part of her wanted to step forward to say something to stand between Captain Hartwell and the woman he was trying to destroy. But what could she say? She was a junior attendant, 10 months on the job. No authority, no leverage, no voice that anyone in this company would listen to. Captain Hartwell had made that clear when he brushed past her in the cockpit. He had made it clear a dozen times before in the small dismissals and casual cruelties that defined his interactions with anyone he considered beneath him, which was everyone. Nicole had seen Hartwell treat passengers like royalty and crew like servants. She had watched him defer to wealthy clients while ignoring the flight attendants who made their experiences possible. She had heard him make comments never quite explicit enough to report, never quite deniable enough to ignore about which passengers belonged in private aviation and which were clearly out of their depth. She had always told herself that it was not her place to judge. That she was new, that she did not understand the culture, that maybe there were reasons for his behavior that she could not see. But watching him now, watching him threaten to have a woman removed from an aircraft because she was black, and wearing a tracksuit, Nicole felt something crack open inside her. This was wrong. This was so deeply, obviously, undeniably wrong that she could not pretend otherwise. And yet, what could she do? In the rear cabin, invisible to everyone in the main compartment, a young man was making a decision of his own. Jalen Brooks had boarded the Horizon 30 minutes ago, settling into the rear compartment with his laptop and a vague intention to catch up on work before his meetings in LA. He was 28 years old, the founder of a successful tech startup that had just closed its Series B funding round, and he had been flying private for about 2 years, long enough to grow comfortable with the experience, not long enough to take it for granted. He had watched the confrontation escalate from his vantage point, partially hidden by the compartment divider, but close enough to hear every word. And with every word, his blood had gotten hotter. He knew what was happening. He had seen it before: the coded language, the fabricated concerns, the wielding of security as a weapon against people who did not look the way someone expected them to look. Last year, it had been his mentor, a black surgeon with 30 years of experience, stopped by security at his own hospital because someone did not recognize him. The year before, his cousin, a corporate lawyer, asked to produce her bar card at her own firm's networking event. Each time, the incident was dismissed, minimized. A misunderstanding. No harm intended. Let us just move on. Jalen was tired of moving on. He pulled out his phone. His Instagram account had 850,000 followers, tech enthusiasts mostly, but also people who followed him for his commentary on what it meant to be young and black and successful in an industry that did not always welcome people who looked like him. He positioned the phone carefully on the armrest, angling it toward the main cabin, where Captain Hartwell stood with his radio holstered and his chest puffed out like a rooster. His thumb hovered over the live button. This could cost him relationships, partnerships. There were people in his network who would see this video and distance themselves, who would call him divisive or confrontational, or the worst insult of all, in corporate America, unprofessional. But there was a woman in that cabin who was about to be humiliated for no reason other than the color of her skin and the clothes on her back. And Jalen Brooks was done being quiet. He pressed the button. In the main cabin, Adrienne remained motionless in her seat. She could hear the distant sound of movement outside the aircraft. The security team approaching, no doubt summoned by Hartwell's radio call. In a few minutes, men in uniforms would board this plane and attempt to remove her. They would fail. But the attempt itself, the public spectacle of a black woman being escorted off a private jet by security, would be devastating enough. It did not matter that she owned the airline. It did not matter that she had every right to be exactly where she was. The image would spread. The narrative would form. Another black woman causing trouble being handled by the appropriate authorities. Adrienne understood how these things worked. She also understood how to turn them around. Her hand moved to her messenger bag, her fingers closing around her phone. She had been waiting for the right moment, the moment when the evidence was irrefutable, when the behavior was undeniable, when even the most creative spin doctor could not explain away what had happened. That moment was approaching. But first, she needed one more thing. She looked up at Captain Hartwell, who was standing in the aisle with his arms crossed, the posture of a man waiting for victory. "Captain," she said, "before security arrives, I want to give you one last opportunity to reconsider." Hartwell snorted. "Reconsider, lady. The only thing I am reconsidering is why I did not call security sooner. I am asking you to think about what you are doing, about what you have said, about the consequences that will follow if you continue down this path." Consequences. Hartwell's voice dripped with contempt. The only consequences here are for you. Refusing crew instructions, creating a disturbance. You will be lucky if we do not press charges. I am not creating a disturbance. I am sitting in my seat. The only person raising their voice is you, because you will not listen. You will not comply. You think you can just... He stopped himself, visibly struggling to control his temper. You know what I am done explaining myself to you. Security will be here in about 90 seconds. When they arrive, you are getting off this plane. End of discussion. Adrian nodded slowly. All right. If that is your final decision, it is. Then I want you to understand something, Captain. I am not going to fight the security officers. I am not going to create a scene. I am going to let them escort me off this aircraft, just as you have instructed. Hartwell's eyes narrowed, suspicious of the sudden compliance. Good. Finally, some sense. But I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember exactly what you said to me. I want you to remember that you were given multiple opportunities to stop, to reconsider, to treat me like a human being, with rights and dignity. And I want you to remember that you chose not to. She held his gaze. Because in about 10 minutes, you are going to wish you had made a different choice. And by then, it will be too late. Hartwell laughed a short, ugly sound. 10 minutes, lady, in 10 minutes you are going to be standing on the tarmac explaining to airport security why you thought you could defy a captain's direct order. And I am going to be 30,000 feet in the air, not thinking about you at all. Adrian smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since boarding the aircraft. A small, quiet smile that did not reach her eyes. We will see. The aircraft door opened. 2 security officers stepped aboard, both men, both in their 40s, both wearing the badges and uniforms of Teterboro Airport security. The first one, a Hispanic man with a weathered face and cautious eyes, surveyed the cabin. His gaze moved from Hartwell to Adrian, to the Pembertons, to the rear cabin, where he clocked Jalen Brooks with his phone clearly positioned. His expression flickered with something recognition. Concern. It was hard to tell. His name tag read, Officer D. Torres. Captain Hartwell. You called for assistance. Hartwell straightened, squaring his shoulders. Officer Torres. Yes, this passenger, he gestured toward Adrian, is refusing to comply with crew instructions. She has been confrontational and disruptive. I need her removed from the aircraft. Officer Torres looked at Adrian. Can you tell me what is happening here? Adrian's voice was calm and clear. Certainly. I am a passenger with a confirmed booking in seat 1A. The captain asked me to move to the rear cabin for what he called security reasons. I asked what specific security concern applied to me. He could not provide one. I believe I am being asked to move because another passenger complained about my appearance. Torres looked at Hartwell. Captain, what specific security concern are we dealing with? Hartwell's jaw tightened. It is a judgment call, officer. 22 years of experience. Sometimes you just know. Know what exactly? That certain passengers do not belong in certain seats. Use your eyes, officer. Does she look like someone who should be in the premium cabin? Torres was silent for a moment. I see. And what makes you believe this passenger does not belong in her assigned seat? Hartwell's face reddened. Look at her. Does she look like she belongs in the premium cabin of a private jet? The tracksuit, the bag. Use your eyes, officer. Torres turned back to Adrienne. Do you have your boarding pass? Captain Hartwell already examined it. It shows seat 1A. A. Carlyle. Torres extended his hand. May I see it anyway? Adrienne handed him the pass. He studied it for a moment, then handed it back. Everything appears to be in order. Legally, I cannot remove you from this aircraft. Your documentation is valid. No crime has been committed. He turned to face Hartwell. Captain, if there is a specific, articulable security concern, something concrete, something actionable, I am happy to assist. But she does not look like she belongs, is not a security concern. It is an opinion. And opinions are not grounds for removal. Hartwell's face went from red to purple. This is my aircraft. I am the captain. My authority is... Your authority ends where discrimination begins, Captain. The words landed like stones in still water. I suggest you reconsider your next move, because right now, based on what I have observed, the only person disrupting this flight is you. Torres reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Adrian. If you need a witness statement for any future proceedings, call me. Then he turned and walked off the aircraft, his partner following close behind. The cabin was silent. Captain Hartwell stood frozen in the aisle, his hand still raised, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Victoria Pemberton's voice cut through the silence. Unbelievable. Arthur, did you see that? That officer, that security officer, just took her side. Over a captain. Over us. This is exactly what is wrong with this country. No standards, no respect for the proper order of things. Adrian looked at Captain Hartwell. Still want to try to remove me? Hartwell's face was the color of old brick. This is not over, he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. I do not know who you think you are, but I am going to find out. And when I do... Adrian reached for her phone. Actually, she said quietly, I think it is time I told you. In the rear cabin of the Horizon, Jalen Brooks watched his phone screen with growing amazement. When he had pressed the live button 5 minutes ago, he had expected a few hundred viewers, at most curious followers who happened to be online, maybe some tech journalists who followed his feed. He had prepared himself for the possibility that no one would care, that the video would disappear into the endless stream of content that washed across social media every day. He had not expected this. The viewer count was climbing so fast, it was almost hard to read. 12,000, 27,000, 45,000. Comments were flooding the screen faster than he could process them. A torrent of reactions from people all over the world who were watching this drama unfold in real time. Is this real? Someone identify this airline, that pilot needs to be fired. The woman in the tracksuit is a queen. She is so calm. I would be screaming, record everything, everything. This needs to go to the news. What airline is this? I am never flying them. That is Altitude Private Air. Look at the uniform. Everybody, retweet this. Make it viral. Jalen had positioned his phone to capture the main cabin, keeping himself mostly out of frame. From his angle, viewers could see Captain Hartwell standing in the aisle, his posture rigid with authority and anger. They could see the back of Adrian's head, her calm silhouette against the cabin window. They could hear every word, the accusations, the demands, the barely concealed bigotry wrapped in the language of security concerns. They could not see his face, but they could see his hands trembling slightly as he held the phone. This was bigger than he had anticipated. Way bigger. Jalen Brooks had started his company 3 years ago, working out of his apartment in Oakland with nothing but a laptop and a vision for how technology could democratize access to mental health resources. His app, MindBridge, had grown from a side project into a platform with 4 million users partnering with universities and corporations to provide accessible counseling and wellness tools. But the technology was only part of the story. The other part was what it meant to build something as a black man in Silicon Valley, to walk into rooms where no one looked like him, to pitch to investors, who could not see past their assumptions, to fight for every opportunity while watching others have doors opened for them simply because they fit the profile. He had learned to navigate those spaces, to code switch, to dress the right way, talk the right way, present himself in a way that made white gatekeepers comfortable. But he had never stopped being angry. Not the kind of anger that burned hot and destructive. That kind of anger got black men killed. No, his was a slower burn. A determination to succeed in spite of the obstacles, and then to use that success to change the game for those who came after. Watching Captain Hartwell try to remove a black woman from her seat, watching him use the language of security to mask what was clearly prejudice, Jalen felt that slow burn flare into something brighter. This was exactly what he had been fighting against. This was exactly what needed to be exposed. The viewer count hit 67,000. Jalen's phone buzzed with notifications, DMs from journalist friends asking for context texts from his PR team, wondering if he knew his feed was blowing up mentions from verified accounts with millions of followers who were sharing his stream. Private jet racism was trending. Altitude air shame was climbing. Who is this woman was exploding as viewers tried to identify the calm, composed passenger who was refusing to back down. Jalen watched as security officers boarded the plane and then miraculously sided with the passenger. He watched Captain Hartwell's face transform from confident to confused to furious. He watched the smug satisfaction drain from Victoria Pemberton's expression as she realized that the proper order of things was not quite as proper as she had believed. And then he watched the woman in seat 1A reach for her phone. Something in her posture shifted. A subtle change, the straightening of the spine, the squaring of the shoulders that suggested the balance of power was about to shift dramatically. Jalen leaned forward, adjusting his phone angle slightly. Whatever was about to happen, he was not going to miss it. In the main cabin, Adrian felt the weight of her phone in her hand. The device contained everything she needed, direct lines to her executive assistant, her legal team, the board of directors of the company she had just acquired. One call would set everything in motion. One call would end Captain Hartwell's career, ban the Pembertons from her airline, and trigger a review of every complaint, every incident, every whispered allegation that had accumulated against Altitude Private Air over the years. But before she made that call, she wanted one more moment, one more chance to see the true character of the people around her. She looked past Hartwell to Nicole Martinez, who was still standing frozen in the galley doorway, her face a mask of barely controlled anguish. Nicole. The young flight attendant startled at the sound of her name. Yes, you tried to tell Captain Hartwell that my booking came from corporate. You tried to warn him. Nicole's eyes widened. She glanced at Hartwell, then back at Adrian. I just wanted to make sure there was not a misunderstanding. I did not— You did the right thing, Adrian said quietly. Remember that. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing. Nicole's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry this is happening. I wish I could— Do not apologize for something that is not your fault. Adrienne turned back to face Hartwell. The captain was still standing in the aisle, his posture rigid, his face mottled with barely suppressed rage. Behind him, Victoria Pemberton had her phone out, furiously typing something, probably a complaint to whatever customer service address she could find, demanding retribution for the indignity of not getting her way. Captain Hartwell Adrian said, You have had multiple opportunities to stop this. Multiple chances to treat me with basic human dignity. Multiple warnings that there would be consequences for your behavior. You ignored all of them. Hartwell's lip curled. Consequences. Right, you keep saying that word. But here is the reality, Miss Carlyle. You are a nobody. I do not know how you got that boarding pass, and I do not care. After today, you will be banned from every private aviation service on the East Coast. I will make sure of it personally. He crossed his arms. So go ahead. Make your phone call. File your complaint. Do whatever makes you feel better. Because at the end of the day, I have got 22 years in this industry, and you have got a tracksuit and an attitude problem. Who do you think they are going to believe?" Adrian smiled again, that same quiet, contained smile that did not reach her eyes. "Let us find out." She lifted her phone to her ear. "Tamara, it is me." Adrian's voice was calm, measured, utterly composed. She might have been ordering lunch or confirming a meeting time. Nothing in her tone suggested that she was sitting in a cabin, thick with tension, surrounded by people who had spent the last 15 minutes trying to humiliate her. "Execute Protocol Shadow. Full authorization. I want Robert Ashford on this line in 60 seconds. On the other end of the phone, 3 blocks from Teterboro Airport, in a sleek corporate office, Tamara Knowles did not miss a beat. Already ahead of you. Corporate security is monitoring the live stream. We are at 127,000 viewers and climbing. Legal is standing by. Robert is connecting now." Adrian's eyes never left Captain Hartwell's face. The live stream, a passenger in the rear cabin, went live about 8 minutes ago. It is everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. The hashtags are trending nationally. Adrian processed this information with a slight nod. She had expected witnesses. She had hoped for documentation. But a live stream with over 100,000 viewers was better than she could have planned. Is Robert connected, putting him through now? There was a brief click, and then a new voice joined the call. Robert Ashford, the former CEO of Altitude Private Air, who had stayed on after the acquisition to manage day-to-day operations. "Miss Carlyle." His voice was strained with barely controlled panic. "I am watching the feed. I do not have words. I am so deeply sorry. Whatever you need, whatever you want done." "Robert, I need you to listen carefully. Captain Derek Hartwell has attempted to remove me from Seat 1A, citing fabricated security concerns. He has made explicit statements suggesting I do not belong based on my appearance. This has been witnessed by crew passengers and approximately 130,000 internet viewers. Are you prepared to act?" "Absolutely." "What are your instructions?" Adrienne let the pause stretch just long enough for Captain Hartwell to understand that something had shifted, that the ground beneath his feet was no longer solid. "Terminate Captain Hartwell immediately, revoke his credentials, initiate a full investigation into his service record, every flight, every complaint, every incident over the past 5 years. And Robert, yes, have a replacement crew standing by. I still intend to get to Los Angeles. Consider it done. Captain Eleanor Reyes is at Teterboro now. She was scheduled for this afternoon's return flight. I am calling her immediately. She can be at the aircraft in 15 minutes. Good. Adrian lowered the phone but did not end the call. She wanted everyone in the cabin to understand that corporate was listening, that every word spoken from this point forward was being recorded and logged. The cabin had gone silent. Captain Hartwell's face had transformed over the course of the conversation. The confident sneer had melted into confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning horror that drained the color from his cheeks like water from a bathtub. He started. Do not, Adrian said, her voice still perfectly calm. Do not say another word. Victoria Pemberton was staring at her phone, her fingers frozen mid-type, her face a mask of incomprehension. Arthur, she whispered. What is happening? Arthur Pemberton did not answer. He was watching Adrian with an expression that suggested he had just realized he was standing in a minefield and had no idea where the safe ground was. Nicole Martinez had pressed both hands over her mouth. Her eyes were enormous, glistening with tears that might have been relief or shock or some combination of both. And in the rear cabin, Jalen Brooks adjusted his phone angle, making sure his 147,000 viewers could see everything that was about to unfold. Hartwell found his voice. Wait, who did you just call? What do you mean, terminate? I am a captain. You cannot just— Actually, Adrian said I can. And I just did. But I have a contract. I have 22 years of service. You cannot— Some random passenger cannot just call corporate and— I am not a random passenger, Captain Hartwell. Adrian stood up slowly, unfolding from seat 1A with a grace that seemed to change the very geometry of the cabin. She was not a tall woman, but in that moment she seemed to tower over everyone around her. My name is Adrian Carlyle. I am the founder and CEO of Carlyle Global Holdings. 3 weeks ago I completed the acquisition of Altitude Private Air for $312 million. She let the words settle. This aircraft, the one you are standing in, was purchased on my authorization. Its tail number N700CG includes my company's initials. The interior specifications were designed according to my personal requirements. She took a step forward, closing the distance between herself and Hartwell. In other words, Captain, you just tried to remove the owner of this airline from her own seat, on her own plane. Using security concerns you fabricated out of thin air, in front of witnesses, on a live stream with over 150,000 viewers. She was standing directly in front of him now, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead. Your career with Altitude Private Air is over. Your credentials will be revoked by the time we finish this conversation. Your pension is frozen pending investigation. And your name, Captain Derek Hartwell, is going to become synonymous with exactly the kind of prejudice and arrogance that has no place in this industry. Hartwell's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I did not know. Of course you did not know, Adrian said. That is exactly the point. You looked at me, at my tracksuit, my bag, my skin, and you decided I did not belong. You did not check. You did not ask. You did not stop to consider for even a moment that you might be wrong. She held his gaze. You assumed. And that assumption just cost you everything. If you are still with me, drop a fire emoji in the comments. Because what happens next is going to change everything. Captain Hartwell thought he was protecting his authority. Instead, he destroyed it. Victoria Pemberton thought she was defending her status. Instead, she exposed her character to the world. And Adrian Carlyle. She did not just reclaim her seat. She revealed something that every person who has ever been underestimated already knows. True power does not announce itself. It does not need a uniform or a title or a designer label. It reveals itself when the moment is right. The plane is in the air now. The crisis is behind us. But the story is not over. Because there is still Nicole Martinez, a young flight attendant who chose decency over self-interest and has no idea what that choice is about to mean for her future. There is still the aftermath, the fallout that will ripple through an industry and change the way people think about who belongs in which spaces. And there is still the question that matters most. What happens when the quiet person in the corner turns out to be the one holding all the cards? Stay with me. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Captain Derek Hartwell stood frozen in the aisle, his face ashen, his hands hanging limply at his sides. 22 years of career, 22 years of authority, 22 years of believing that his uniform made him untouchable, all of it crumbling away like sand castles in a rising tide. Behind him, Victoria Pemberton had gone very, very still. Her phone had slipped from her fingers, landing on the seat cushion beside her. Her diamond bracelets no longer glittered with the confidence of wealth. They seemed almost garish, now costume jewelry on a woman who had just realized she had catastrophically misjudged a situation. Arthur Pemberton had his head in his hands. And Nicole Martinez, young, nervous, terrified. Nicole Martinez was crying silently in the galley doorway, tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched a woman do what Nicole had been too afraid to do. Herself stand her ground. Adrian's phone was still connected to corporate. Robert Ashford's voice came through thin but audible. "Miss Carlyle, Captain Reyes is en route. ETA 12 minutes. Corporate security is coordinating with Teterboro ground services. We are monitoring the social media response. It is significant. Define significant. The live stream has been picked up by multiple news outlets. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they are all running it. The hashtags are trending nationally. Number 1 right now is altitude air exposed. Number 2 is tracksuit billionaire." Adrian allowed herself a small, private smile at the second hashtag. "Robert, I want you to prepare a statement. The tone should be accountability, not apology. We acknowledge what happened. We take responsibility for the culture that allowed it to happen. We outline specific immediate actions being taken. No corporate deflection, no passive voice. Clear language, human language. Understood. I will have a draft ready within the hour." "Good. And Robert, yes. This is just the beginning. When I get to Los Angeles, we are going to have a very long conversation about how altitude private air operates. But for now, let us focus on getting through the next hour." "Of course." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her messenger bag. Hartwell finally found his voice. "I did not." He stopped, swallowed, tried again. "I did not know who you were." "If I had known." "If you had known," Adriana interrupted, "you would have treated me differently. Is that what you are saying? Yes, I mean, no. Because that is exactly the problem, Captain. You treated me the way you treat people you perceive as powerless. People who do not fit the profile. People who cannot fight back. The only reason you are apologizing now is because you have discovered that I can." She shook her head slowly. "What about all the other passengers who could not? What about the people you have humiliated over the past 22 years who did not have the resources or the platform to hold you accountable? Where is their apology?" Hartwell had no answer. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire worldview collapse in real time, which in a sense he had. Victoria Pemberton's voice cut through the silence, sharp and desperate. This is all a misunderstanding. I did not ask him to remove you. I simply asked for clarification about the seating arrangements. That is all. If the captain overreacted, that is not my fault. I am a platinum client. I have standards. That does not make me—" She stopped, realizing too late that every word she said was being broadcast to hundreds of thousands of people. Adrian turned to face her. "Mrs. Pemberton, you called another passenger over to complain about my presence. You told Nicole to summon the captain because you did not think I belonged in the premium seat. You described me as someone who looked like she won a raffle. You questioned how I got through the Teterboro lounge. You referred to these people having access to spaces they do not understand." Victoria's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Those words are being taken out of— "I heard you, Mrs. Pemberton. Everyone in this cabin heard you, and approximately 180,000 people on the internet heard you as well." Adrian's voice remained perfectly level. "I am not going to fire you because you are not my employee, but I am exercising my right as owner of this airline to deny you service. Your booking with Altitude Private Air is cancelled, permanently. You and your husband are blacklisted from all Carlyle Global properties, which includes 6 hotel chains, 4 restaurant groups, and 2 corporate conference facilities that your husband's fund has used in the past." Victoria's mouth opened and closed. "You cannot. Arthur, tell her she cannot." Arthur Pemberton raised his head from his hands. His face was grey with exhaustion, and something else, resignation perhaps. "Victoria," he said quietly, "please stop talking." The aircraft door opened again. This time the figure who stepped aboard was not security. She was a woman in her mid-40s with warm brown skin and dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, wearing a pilot's uniform with 4 gold stripes on the epaulets. Her name tag read, Captain Elena Reyes. She surveyed the cabin with calm, professional eyes, taking in the frozen tableau. Hartwell's devastated expression, Victoria's outrage, Adrienne's composed authority. Miss Carlyle. She said, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested she had been born somewhere warmer than New Jersey. I am Captain Elena Reyes. I have been briefed on the situation. I will be taking over command of this flight. Adrienne nodded. Thank you, Captain Reyes. I appreciate your quick response. Of course. Captain Reyes turned to face Hartwell. Derek, you need to collect your belongings from the cockpit and deplane. Corporate security is waiting on the tarmac to escort you off the property. Hartwell stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. Elena, we have worked together for 6 years. You know me. You know I would never. I know what I just watched on a live stream that 200,000 people are seeing. Captain Reyes said, her voice firm but not unkind. And I know that you need to leave this aircraft now. Whatever explanations or justifications you have can be addressed through the proper channels. But right now, in this moment, you need to go. Hartwell's shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him all at once, like air from a punctured balloon. He looked suddenly old and tired, and utterly defeated. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the cockpit. He emerged a moment later with his flight bag, his captain's hat clutched in one hand, like a prop from a costume he was no longer authorized to wear. He did not look at Adrienne as he passed. He did not look at anyone. He just walked down the aisle, down the air stairs, and onto the tarmac where 2 security officers were waiting to escort him away. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Victoria Pemberton began to stand. We are leaving too, Arthur. I refuse to remain on this aircraft with... Mrs. Pemberton. Captain Reyes interrupted. You are welcome to deplane if you choose. However, I should inform you that your return flight to New York has been cancelled. All future bookings with Altitude Private Air have been voided. You will need to make alternative arrangements for your travel. Victoria's face contorted. This is outrageous! Arthur, we will sue! We will sue them for everything they... Victoria. Arthur Pemberton's voice was flat, exhausted. We are not going to sue anyone. We are going to get off this plane, find a commercial flight, and spend the next several months hoping that the internet forgets this happened before it destroys our business relationships. He looked at his wife with something that might have been pity. Which it might? Because that woman, he nodded toward Adrienne, owns half the hotels and restaurants we do business with. And right now 200,000 people are watching you throw a tantrum about being asked to sit in 2B instead of 1A. Victoria's face crumpled. For a moment, just a moment, she looked like a person rather than a caricature. A person who had spent her entire life believing that money and status entitled her to things and was only now realizing that neither could protect her from the consequences of her own cruelty. Come on, Arthur said, taking her arm. Let us go. They walked past Adrienne without speaking down the aisle, down the air stairs, and out of her life forever. The cabin felt different with the Pembertons gone. Lighter, cleaner, as if their departure had removed a toxic element from the air itself, allowing everyone remaining to breathe more easily. Captain Eleanor Reyes moved to the cockpit with quiet efficiency, beginning her pre-flight checks. Her co-pilot, a young man named First Officer James Rivera, who had arrived with her, followed close behind. Within minutes, the rhythms of professional competence had replaced the chaos of the past 30 minutes. In the galley, a new flight attendant had materialized, Angela Ortiz, a woman in her early 30s with a warm smile and steady hands. She began preparing the cabin for departure with the practiced movements of someone who had been doing this job long enough to be excellent at it. Adrienne remained in seat 1A. Her book sat forgotten in her lap. She did not reach for it. Instead, she sat quietly processing everything that had just happened, not with the emotional exhaustion she might have felt in her younger years, but with the methodical calm of someone taking inventory of a situation before deciding how to proceed. The test was over, but the real work was just beginning. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen, Tamara Knowles, and answered. Tamara. Adrienne. Her executive assistant's voice was tight with barely contained emotion. I have been watching the whole thing. Are you okay? I am fine. Captain Reyes is prepping for departure. We should be in the air within 15 minutes. The response is, I do not even know how to describe it. The video is everywhere. Every major news outlet has picked it up. The hashtags are still trending. Tracksuit billionaire is actually #1 now. People are calling you a hero. Adrienne closed her eyes briefly. I am not a hero. I am a businesswoman who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time to expose some very wrong behavior. That is not how the internet sees it. You stayed calm. You did not back down. You held that man accountable without raising your voice or losing your composure. People are losing their minds over it. In a good way. We will see how they feel tomorrow. Public opinion is fickle. Maybe. But this feels different. This feels like something that is going to have legs. Adrienne was silent for a moment, considering. Tamara. I need you to do something for me. Anything. The young man in the rear cabin, the one who was live streaming. I want to know who he is. I want his full background, his business history, his reputation in the industry. And then I want to meet with him. Today, if possible. Tomorrow at the latest. I will find out and get back to you within the hour. Good. And Tamara, yes, thank you. For everything. Always. The call ended. Adrienne looked up to find Nicole Martinez standing hesitantly at the edge of the main cabin, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes red from crying. Miss Carlyle, I just wanted to say, come here, Nicole. The young flight attendant approached slowly, as if she expected to be struck by lightning at any moment. She stopped a few feet from Adrienne's seat, her posture defensive, her expression uncertain. I want to apologize, Nicole said the words, tumbling out in a rush. I should have done more. When Captain Hartwell came out of the cockpit when he started questioning you, I knew it was wrong. I knew it was so wrong. But I was scared. I was so scared of losing my job, of getting blacklisted, of... She broke off, her voice cracking. I have only been doing this for 10 months. I do not have connections or experience or anything. I just have this job. And I was so afraid that if I said something, if I stood up to him, I would lose everything. Adrienne listened without interrupting. When Nicole had finished, she spoke quietly. Nicole, look at me. The young woman raised her eyes. You tried to warn Captain Hartwell. You told him my booking came from corporate. You tried to de-escalate the situation. And when he threatened you, when he told you to get back to your station and let him handle things, you did not double down on his position. You did not throw me under the bus to appease him or Mrs. Pemberton. You stood there terrified, and you did not make things worse. She held Nicole's gaze. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people in your position would have sided with the captain just to protect themselves? How many would have believed his version of events because it was easier than questioning authority? Nicole shook her head mutely. You did the right thing, Nicole. Under impossible circumstances, with everything to lose, you did the right thing. That is not something to apologize for. That is something to be proud of. Nicole's tears started again, but different tears this time. Not tears of shame or fear, but something cleaner. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Just remember this moment. Remember that you had a choice, and you chose decency over self-interest. That is the foundation of integrity, Nicole. Everything else can be taught. But that is who you are. Angela Ortiz appeared at the cabin entrance. Miss Carlyle. Captain Reyes asked me to let you know we are ready for departure whenever you are comfortable. Adrian nodded. Thank you, Angela. I am ready. She turned back to Nicole. You should head home. Rest. Process everything that happened today. But before you go, I want you to know something. What is that? This morning I came aboard this aircraft to test the culture of a company I had just acquired. I expected to find problems. I expected to find employees who had absorbed toxic behaviors and attitudes from leadership that did not know any better. She paused. What I did not expect to find was someone who still believed in doing the right thing, even when it was scary, even when it was hard, even when no one would have blamed them for taking the easy way out. Adrienne reached into her messenger bag and pulled out a business card, simple, elegant, with just her name and a phone number embossed in gold. I would like you to call me tomorrow, Nicole. We have things to discuss. Nicole stared at the card as if it might burst into flames. I do not understand. You will. Tomorrow. Adrian smiled a real smile this time, warm and genuine. Now go home. And Nicole, take a cab. Do not try to drive. You have been through a lot today. Nicole took the card with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for everything. She turned and walked to the aircraft door, pausing at the threshold to look back one last time. Then she was gone, descending the air stairs into the bright morning sunlight. Her life irrevocably changed. In the rear cabin, Jalen Brooks had finally ended his live stream. The final viewer count had been 237,000, a number that would grow exponentially as clips were shared, embedded, and reposted across every platform on the internet. His phone was already exploding with notifications, interview requests, media inquiries, DMs from celebrities and journalists and complete strangers who wanted to thank him for documenting what had happened. But Jalen was not looking at his phone. He was looking at the woman in seat 1A. He had watched her sit calmly while a captain tried to throw her off a plane. He had watched her respond to insults with composure, to threats with dignity, to prejudice with patient, implacable truth. He had watched her reveal herself as the owner of the entire airline, not with triumphant gloating, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to teach. She was remarkable, and Jalen wanted to know her story. He stood up from his seat, straightened his jacket, and walked forward into the main cabin. Excuse me? Miss Carlyle. Adrian looked up. You are the one who was live streaming. It was not a question. Yes, I am Jalen Brooks. I hope that was okay. When I saw what was happening, I could not sit there and do nothing. I could not let it disappear like all the other incidents that nobody ever talks about because there is no proof. Adrian studied him for a long moment. Sit down, Jalen. He sat in the seat across from her, his heart pounding. You did something important today, Adrian said. You created a record. You gave voice to what happened in this cabin. You made it impossible for anyone to claim this was a misunderstanding or a he said, she said situation. I have seen this too many times. People like us being questioned, challenged, humiliated for existing in spaces that others assume are not meant for us. And nothing ever changes because there is never any evidence. Just our word against theirs. Adrian nodded slowly. Tell me about yourself, Jalen. What do you do? I am a founder. Tech company. Mental health platform called MindBridge. We just closed our Series B. I know MindBridge. Good company. Good mission. Jalen blinked. You know my company. I know most companies worth knowing. It is my job." She tilted her head slightly. "I am going to have someone reach out to you tomorrow. We should talk. I think there might be opportunities for collaboration. That would be... Yes. Absolutely, yes." Captain Reyes's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning. This is Captain Elena Reyes. We have been cleared for departure. Flight time to Los Angeles will be 5 hours and 12 minutes. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. Thank you for flying with Altitude Private Air." The aircraft began to move, taxiing toward the runway. Adrienne looked out the window at the tarmac falling away behind them. Somewhere down there, Derek Hartwell was sitting in a security office, watching his career crumble. Somewhere down there, Victoria and Arthur Pemberton were trying to book a commercial flight, their reputation in tatters. And somewhere out there, millions of people were watching a video that would change the conversation about bias and assumption and who gets to decide who belongs. The Gulfstream G700's engines spooled up. The power pressed Adrienne back into her seat, a velvet push controlled and confident. The horizon lifted off the runway and climbed into the sky. The Gulfstream G700 climbed through 30,000 feet, leaving the grey clouds of the northeast behind and entering a realm of brilliant, endless blue. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had undergone a complete transformation. The toxic tension that had filled the space during Captain Hartwell's tenure had dissipated, replaced by a calm professionalism that felt almost sacred after the chaos of the morning. Captain Elena Reyes flew the aircraft with quiet competence, her voice on the intercom warm but economical. Angela Ortiz moved through the cabin with an efficiency that suggested genuine care rather than performative service, and Adrienne Carlisle sat in seat 1A, her rightful seat, watching the world fall away beneath her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Tamara. "The young man from the live stream is Jalen Brooks, founder of MindBridge, 28 years old, Howard graduate, clean reputation. His company is doing good work. Video has now been viewed 12 million times across all platforms. CNN wants an interview. So does the Times. So does everyone." Adrienne typed back, "Schedule calls for tomorrow. Today I rest." Then she turned off her phone and slipped it into her bag. Jalen Brooks had moved to a seat closer to the front of the cabin, not directly adjacent to Adrienne, but close enough that they could speak without raising their voices. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. When did you decide to reveal yourself, I mean? To tell them who you were?" Adrienne considered the question. "I did not decide in advance. I was watching, gathering evidence, waiting to see how far they would go and whether anyone would step in to stop them. And if security had removed you, if they had believed Hartwell and dragged you off the plane, then I would have revealed myself on the tarmac, or in the terminal, or in the press conference that would have followed." She met his eyes. The truth was always going to come out, Jalen. The only question was how much rope they were going to use to hang themselves before it did. Jalen absorbed this. You were never actually in danger. You had all the power the whole time. Define danger. Adrienne's voice was quiet but intense. Yes, I own this airline. Yes, I had the resources to protect myself, legally and professionally. But in the moment when Hartwell was standing over me, telling me that I did not belong, calling security to have me removed, the humiliation was real. The degradation was real. The reminder that no matter how far I have climbed, there will always be people who look at my skin and see a problem to be solved that was real. She paused. Power does not make you immune to prejudice, Jalen. It just gives you more options for responding to it. Angela Ortiz appeared with a silver tray. Miss Carlisle, can I offer you anything? We have fresh coffee tea, sparkling water, champagne. Coffee, please. Black. Of course. And for you, Mr. Brooks. "The same." "Thank you." Angela poured their drinks with practiced grace and withdrew. Jalen wrapped his hands around the warm mug, thinking. "I have been flying private for about 2 years now," he said. "Long enough to stop being surprised by the experience, but not long enough to take it for granted. And in all that time, I have never seen anything like what happened today." "Consider yourself fortunate," Adrienne said. "I have seen it more times than I can count. Really, not always this blatant. Usually it is more subtle. The sideways glances when I walk into a first-class lounge, the requests to see additional ID just to verify, the assumption that I must be someone's assistant or that I am in the wrong place." She took a sip of her coffee. "The first time I flew private was 15 years ago. I had just closed a deal that netted my company $100 million. I was exhausted, elated, and looking forward to getting home. And when I walked into the FBO, the attendant looked at me and said, 'The commercial terminal is about a mile down the road.'" Jalen winced. "What did you do?" I showed her my charter confirmation. She was mortified. Apologized profusely. Could not have been more accommodating after that. Adrienne shrugged. But the damage was done. The assumption had been made. And I have never forgotten it. Does it get easier? Over time? No. But you get better at using it. Using it as motivation, as fuel. Every time someone underestimates me, I add it to the fire that keeps me building. Every dismissal, every slight, every "you do not belong here." I use it all. I let it make me sharper, more determined, more focused on proving that their assumptions are not just wrong, but irrelevant. She set down her coffee cup. That is what today was about, Jalen. Not revenge, not embarrassment, transformation. I did not just want to punish Hartwell and Pemberton. I wanted to use this moment, this very public, very visible moment, to change the conversation. To show people that bias has consequences, that assumptions can cost you everything, and that the quiet woman in the tracksuit might just be the most powerful person in the room. The aircraft hummed around them, steady and sure. Outside the windows, the sky stretched endlessly in every direction, a blue so deep it was almost purple, unmarred by clouds or turbulence. Jalen thought about his company, about the mental health platform he had built to help people who could not afford traditional therapy, about the barriers he had faced the investors who had passed on him because he did not fit the pattern, the partners who had questioned his credentials, the constant low-level friction of being a black man in spaces designed for people who did not look like him. He thought about the woman in front of him who had turned that friction into fuel for an empire. "Can I ask you something else?" "You can ask me anything, Jalen. Whether I answer is a different matter." "What is next?" "For you, I mean. After today." Adrienne was quiet for a long moment. "Altitude, private air is going to change. That is not optional, it is required. The culture that produced Derek Hartwell did not develop overnight, and it will not be fixed overnight either. But it will be fixed. Every training program, every hiring practice, every performance review, all of it will be rebuilt from the ground up. Not because it is good PR, although it is, but because it is right." She met Jalen's eyes. "And I am going to make Nicole Martinez the face of that change." The flight attendant, the one who was crying. She tried to warn Hartwell. She tried to do the right thing, even though she was terrified, even though she had everything to lose and nothing to gain. That is character, Jalen. That is exactly the kind of person I want building the new culture at Altitude. "What are you going to do for her?" Adrienne smiled. "I am going to give her a job that changes her life. I am going to trust her with responsibility she does not think she is ready for. And I am going to watch her rise to meet it because people with character always do." The intercom clicked. "Good morning again. This is Captain Reyes. We have reached our cruising altitude of 41,000 feet. Weather looks clear all the way to Los Angeles. current flight time is 4 hours and 48 minutes. Please feel free to move about the cabin. And, Miss Carlyle, it is an honor to have you aboard." Adrienne pressed the call button. "Thank you, Captain Reyes. The honor is mine." She released the button and settled back into her seat. Jalen was still watching her, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, "when I started that live stream, I thought I was just documenting an incident. Something to post, maybe get some traction, raise some awareness. I did not expect this. What did you expect? I do not know. A few thousand views, maybe some discussion in the comments." He shook his head. "Not 12 million views. Not international news coverage. Not sitting here having coffee with a billionaire who just fired a pilot mid-flight." Adrienne laughed, a genuine warm sound that seemed to surprise them both. "Life is full of unexpected turns, Jalen. The key is to be ready when they come." She tilted her head. "Tell me about MindBridge. What is your vision for the company?" And for the next 2 hours, as the Gulfstream G700 carried them across the country at 600 miles per hour, they talked about technology and access and the mental health crisis facing young people everywhere, about what it meant to build something that mattered, about the responsibility that came with success, the obligation to lift others as you climbed. They talked as equals, and somewhere over the heartland of America, 39,000 feet above the ordinary concerns of the world below, a partnership began to form. While the horizon soared westward, carrying Adrienne Carlyle toward California, the consequences of the morning's events were already rippling outward. In a stark conference room at Teterboro Airport, Captain Derek Hartwell sat alone. His flight bag was on the floor beside him. His captain's hat lay on the table, its gold braid catching the harsh fluorescent light. His credentials, ID badge, security clearance. Pilot's license had been collected by corporate security 20 minutes ago, pending investigation. He had been flying for 22 years. He had commanded hundreds of flights, transported some of the most powerful people in the world, built a reputation as one of the most reliable pilots in private aviation. And in the span of one morning, all of it had evaporated. The door opened. Robert Ashford walked in. He was carrying a manila folder, and his expression held none of the deference that Hartwell had come to expect from corporate executives over the years. If anything, he looked tired, resigned, like a man who had been handed a very unpleasant task and intended to complete it as efficiently as possible. "Derek." "Robert." "Look, I can explain." "There is nothing to explain." Robert sat down across from him and opened the folder. "Your termination is effective immediately. This document outlines the terms. You will receive accrued vacation pay through today's date. Your pension is frozen pending an internal investigation into your conduct over the past 5 years. If the investigation reveals additional incidents of discriminatory behavior, those pension funds may be subject to forfeiture." Hartwell's face went white. "Forfeiture, I have 22 years invested in that pension. You cannot just—" "The decision is not mine to make. It is Miss Carlyle's. And based on what I witnessed this morning, what 200,000 people witnessed this morning, I do not think she is inclined toward leniency." Robert slid a document across the table. "This is a separation agreement. If you sign it, you agree not to contest your termination or make public statements disparaging Altitude Private Air or its employees. In exchange, we will not pursue civil action for the reputational damage your conduct has caused." Hartwell stared at the document. His hands were shaking. "I did not know who she was," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I had known. If you had known, you would have treated her differently." "Yes, you have said that. Multiple times." Robert's voice was cold. "Do you understand why that makes it worse, not better?" Hartwell looked up. She was wearing a tracksuit. No jewelry. A worn-out bag. In 22 years of private aviation, I have never seen. You have never seen a wealthy black woman who did not feel the need to prove her wealth through clothing and accessories. Is that what you are saying? Silence. Sign the document, Derek. Take what is being offered. And then go home and think very carefully about how you got here. Robert stood. Your career in aviation is over. Every airline, every charter service, every FBO in the country will have seen that video by the end of the day. No one will hire you. That is not a threat. It is just reality. He walked to the door. But your life is not over. You can still choose what comes next. You can use this as a wake-up call, an opportunity to examine the assumptions you have been carrying and the damage they have caused. Or you can spend the rest of your life insisting that you are the victim here. He opened the door. I know which choice I would recommend, but it is yours to make. He left. In a different part of Teterboro, Victoria, and Arthur Pemberton were having a very different kind of reckoning. Their chartered return flight had been cancelled. Their booking with Altitude Private Air had been voided. And when Victoria had attempted to book a seat on a competing charter service, she had discovered that word travels fast in the insular world of private aviation. I am sorry, Mrs. Pemberton, the booking agent had said, not sounding sorry at all. We do not have any availability for the foreseeable future. They were sitting now in the main terminal, the commercial terminal, waiting for a flight to Newark, from which they would have to arrange ground transportation back to Connecticut. Economy class. Middle seats. Victoria had not spoken a word in 40 minutes. Her face was frozen in an expression that might have been shock or rage or the dawning realization that her world had fundamentally shifted beneath her feet. Arthur sat beside her, scrolling through his phone with growing horror. The video was everywhere. It had been picked up by every major news outlet, shared by celebrities with millions of followers, dissected by commentators and critics, and random internet users who had formed very strong opinions about what they had witnessed. Victoria Pemberton's name was trending. Not in a good way. Arthur, she said finally, her voice thin and strange. What are people saying? You do not want to know. Tell me. Arthur hesitated. Then he turned his phone toward her. The screen showed a Twitter thread with thousands of retweets. The first tweet read, Victoria Pemberton just became the poster child for racist entitlement. Tried to get a black woman kicked off a private jet because she was wearing a tracksuit. Turns out that woman owns the airline. Tracksuit billionaire Altitude Air exposed, below it hundreds of responses. I hope she enjoys flying Spirit from now on. Imagine fumbling your entire social standing because you could not handle seeing a black woman in a nice seat. Victoria Pemberton is what happens when you have money but no class. The way she said, these people, I felt that in my soul. Victoria's hands were shaking. This will blow over, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. These things always blow over. People forget. Victoria. Arthur's voice was gentle but firm. The Morrison deal is dead. I got the call 20 minutes ago. They are backing out. What? They cannot. We have been working on that for months. They can, and they did. And they are not the only ones. He looked at her with an expression that mixed pity with something else, something that might have been a kind of exhausted relief. This is going to follow us for a long time, maybe forever. People are going to look us up online and the first thing they are going to see is that video. Victoria stared at him. For the first time in their 32 years of marriage, Arthur Pemberton saw his wife at a complete loss for words. What do we do? She whispered. I do not know, Arthur said honestly, but I think we start by being very quiet for a while. And maybe we think about why we acted the way we did today. Why you acted the way you did. I did not do anything wrong. I just asked about the seating. Victoria. Arthur's voice was sharper than she had ever heard it. Stop. Just stop. She stopped. And in the crowded, noisy, utterly unglamorous commercial terminal of Teterboro Airport, Victoria Pemberton began to understand what her assumptions had cost her. 3 hours later, the Horizon touched down at Van Nuys Airport with the smooth precision of a well-oiled machine. Captain Elena Reyes brought the aircraft to a gentle stop, and the engine spooled down into silence. The California sun flooded through the windows, bright and golden, a world away from the grey morning they had left behind in New Jersey. Angela Ortiz opened the cabin door, and warm, dry air rushed in the distinctive scent of Los Angeles, equal parts exhaust and optimism, and the faint perfume of a million blooming flowers. Adrian gathered her messenger bag and stood. Thank you, Angela. Please convey my appreciation to Captain Reyes. It was an excellent flight. Of course, Miss Carlyle. It was an honor. Jalen Brooks was waiting by the door, his own bag slung over his shoulder. So he said, What happens now? Now I go to a hotel, take a very long bath, and sleep for about 12 hours. Tomorrow I start rebuilding an airline. She extended her hand. Thank you, Jalen, for what you did today. He shook her hand firmly. Thank you for showing me what real leadership looks like. My assistant will be in touch about that meeting. I think there is a lot we can do together. I look forward to it. He descended the air stairs and walked toward the waiting car that his assistant had arranged. Adrian watched him go, a young man with character and courage, who had made a choice to stand up for what was right when it would have been easier to stay silent. She filed his name away for future reference. There would be opportunities to work with him. She would make sure of it. The next morning, Adrian was in her Los Angeles office when her phone rang. It was Robert Ashford calling from New York. Good morning, Robert. What is the status? The Hartwell situation is resolved. He signed the separation agreement. He is done. And the Pembertons blacklisted across all our platforms. I have also had informal conversations with several competitors off the record, of course. Let us just say, their options for private aviation have become limited. Good. Adrian paused. And Nicole Martinez. That is actually why I am calling. She left me a voicemail this morning. She sounded confused. Said you gave her your card and asked her to call, but she was not sure if she should. Transfer her call to me. Now, of course. A moment later, Nicole's voice came through the line, small and uncertain. Miss Carlyle, I am sorry to bother you. I was not sure if I should call, but you said... Nicole, thank you for calling. I was hoping to hear from you. You were, I was. How are you feeling? After yesterday. A long pause. I do not know how to answer that. Everything feels different. Like I woke up in a world that does not quite make sense anymore. That is understandable. You witnessed something extraordinary yesterday. You were part of something extraordinary. It is normal to need time to process. People keep texting me. People I have not talked to in years. They saw the video. They saw me in the background crying. They want to know what happened. Nicole's voice cracked slightly. I do not know what to tell them. Tell them the truth. Tell them you were caught in an impossible situation and you did the best you could. But I did not do anything. I just stood there. Nicole. Adrian's voice was firm but kind. You tried to warn Captain Hartwell. You told him my booking came from corporate. When he threatened you, you did not back down. You did not agree with him or throw me under the bus. You stood your ground. I was so scared. Of course you were scared. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing the right thing while you are terrified. Silence on the line. Then quietly, "You said you wanted to talk to me. About opportunities I did." "Nicole, I am going to ask you a question, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." "Okay. Do you believe that every passenger, regardless of what they are wearing or what they look like, deserves to be treated with basic respect and dignity?" "Yes, of course. Do you believe that the culture at Altitude Private Air needs to change?" "Yes, absolutely. Would you be willing to help me change it?" A longer pause. "I do not understand. I am a junior flight attendant. I have only been with the company for 10 months. I do not have any authority or experience or—" "Nicole, listen to me. I am offering you a position as Director of Passenger Experience and Culture at Altitude Private Air. You would report directly to Robert Ashford. Your responsibilities would include rewriting our entire service manual, redesigning our training programs, and ensuring that what happened yesterday never happens again." Silence. "Your salary would triple. You would have a staff. You would have resources. And you would have my full support in whatever changes you believe are necessary." More silence. "Nicole, are you there? I do not—" Her voice was shaking. "Miss Carlyle, I do not have a business degree. I do not know how to run a department. I have never managed anyone in my life. I can teach you how to read spreadsheets. I can teach you organizational management. I can teach you how to navigate corporate politics and build consensus and implement policy changes." Adrienne's voice softened. "What I cannot teach is character. I cannot teach the moral compass that made you try to warn Captain Hartwell even though you were afraid. I cannot teach the integrity that made you stand there crying rather than joining the crowd against me." She paused. "You already have what matters, Nicole. Everything else is just mechanics." The line was quiet for a long moment. When Nicole spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "When would I start Monday? We will fly you to New York this weekend. Robert will have the contracts ready when you arrive." I do not know what to say." "Say yes." A pause. Then quietly, firmly, "Yes. Good. Welcome to the executive team, Nicole. I will see you Monday." Adrienne ended the call. She sat back in her chair and looked out the window at the Los Angeles skyline, glittering in the morning sun. The rot at Altitude Private Air ran deep. The culture that had produced Derek Hartwell and enabled Victoria Pemberton had been built over years, maybe decades. It would not be dismantled easily, but it would be dismantled. One hire at a time, one policy at a time, one act of courage at a time. And at the center of that transformation would be a young flight attendant who had stood in a galley doorway, terrified, and chosen decency over self-preservation. That was how you changed the world, not with grand gestures or dramatic speeches, with the quiet courage of ordinary people who refused to look away. 6 months passed. The changes at Altitude Private Air had been swift and comprehensive. Every training program had been redesigned. Every hiring practice had been reviewed. Every employee had attended mandatory sessions on bias dignity and the true meaning of service. Nicole Martinez had risen to the challenge in ways that even Adrienne had not anticipated. The young woman who had once stood crying in a galley doorway now commanded a team of 15, spoke at industry conferences, and was quietly revolutionizing how private aviation thought about passenger experience. Her first initiative, the Baseline Respect Protocol, had been adopted by 3 competing airlines within 4 months. Her second, an anonymous reporting system for passengers who experienced discrimination, had already generated over 200 reports, each one investigated and addressed. She was in every sense of the word a leader, and Adrienne Carlyle watched it all with quiet satisfaction. On a Thursday afternoon in late spring, Adrian boarded the Horizon for a flight from New York to San Francisco. The cabin was exactly as she remembered it. Cream leather brushed bronze accents, the quiet hum of excellence. But something was different. Something had changed in the air itself, in the way the crew moved and spoke and carried themselves. The new captain, a black woman named Patricia Gibson, recruited personally by Nicole, greeted her with warm professionalism. "Miss Carlyle, it is an honor to have you aboard. The honor is mine, Captain. How is the weather looking? Clear all the way to San Francisco. Should be a smooth flight. Excellent." Adrian settled into seat 1A, her seat now and always, and pulled out her worn messenger bag. The same bag she had carried for 23 years. The same bag that Victoria Pemberton had sneered at. She reached inside and pulled out a dog-eared paperback, a new biography, this time of another woman who had built an empire from nothing. The aircraft door closed. The engines began to spool up, and as the Horizon lifted off from Teterboro Airport, climbing through the grey clouds toward a sky of brilliant blue, Adrian Carlyle allowed herself a moment of reflection. 6 months ago, she had boarded this same aircraft as an anonymous passenger wearing a tracksuit and carrying a worn bag, ready to see the rot in her newest acquisition for herself. What she had found was worse than she expected, and what she had built in response was better than she could have imagined. Captain Patricia Gibson's voice came over the intercom, calm and confident. "Good afternoon, Miss Carlyle. We have reached our cruising altitude. Flight time to San Francisco is 5 hours and 3 minutes. Please let us know if there is anything we can do to make your flight more comfortable." Adrian smiled. She opened her book and began to read. Captain Derek Hartwell spent 6 months in what his therapist called intensive reflection. The viral video of his confrontation with Adrian Carlyle had made him unhireable in aviation, but more devastatingly, it had forced him to confront the assumptions he had carried for 22 years. He started volunteering at a community center in his hometown, teaching underprivileged kids about aeronautics, and for the first time in his life, he began to see people, really see them, instead of the categories he had sorted them into. He never flew commercially again, but he found a different kind of altitude, the humility to acknowledge his wrongs, and the determination to spend his remaining years proving that people could change. His pension was eventually restored after a year of demonstrated commitment to community service, a decision Adrian Carlyle approved personally with a note that read, "Second chances are earned, not given. You earned yours." Victoria and Arthur Pemberton's fall from social grace was swift and complete. The Morrison deal collapsed, taking with it 3/4 of their investment fund's projected returns. Victoria attempted a comeback on social media 6 months after the incident, posting a carefully worded apology that was immediately dissected and dismissed as insincere by an internet that had not forgotten her words. By the end of the year, they had sold their Connecticut estate, downsized to a modest apartment in Westchester, and discovered something they had never experienced before: anonymity. Arthur later admitted to a journalist that it was the best thing that had ever happened to them. "We spent 30 years climbing a ladder that led nowhere," he said. "Now we are learning how to just be people. It is harder than you would think. But it is better, too." Jalen Brooks's partnership with Carlyle Global Holdings resulted in a $100 million investment in MindBridge, accelerating its expansion to serve over 20 million users worldwide. But more importantly, the collaboration spawned a new initiative, the Witness Project, a platform that connected documented incidents of discrimination with legal resources and media attention, ensuring that the quiet injustices that happened every day could no longer disappear into silence. Jalen spoke about that morning on the Horizon at every opportunity, not as a story of his own courage, but as a lesson in what happened when one person refused to look away. "I just held up a phone," he would say. Adrian Carlyle held up a mirror. "That is the difference between witnessing and leading. I hope someday I can do both." 9 months after the incident on Flight 441, Adrienne Carlisle stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan office, watching the sun set over the Hudson River. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nicole Martinez. First graduating class of the new training program completed today. 47 flight attendants, all certified in the baseline respect protocol. One of them told me that she used to be afraid to speak up when she saw something wrong. Now she knows that speaking up is her job. Thank you for giving me this chance. Adrienne smiled and typed back, You earned it. Every day you earn it again. A knock at the door. Come in. Nicole entered, no longer the nervous young flight attendant who had stood trembling in a galley doorway. She was confident now, polished, carrying herself with the quiet authority of someone who had grown into her power. Miss Carlisle. There is a situation on Flight 892, a passenger complaint about another passenger's appearance. The new captain wants guidance. Adrienne raised an eyebrow. What does your protocol say, baseline respect? Every passenger is valid until proven otherwise. Appearance is never grounds for action. If anyone has a problem with who is sitting where the problem is theirs, not ours, then you do not need me. Handle it. Nicole nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Yes, Miss Carlisle. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Can I ask you something? Always. Why me? That day on the plane you could have promoted anyone. Someone with more experience, more education, more everything. Why did you choose me? Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Because you did not look away, Nicole. Because when everyone else in that cabin was either participating in what was happening or pretending not to see it, you stood there with tears running down your face, feeling every moment of it. That is not weakness. That is conscience. That is the foundation of everything good. She met Nicole's eyes. I did not see you that day, Nicole. I recognized you. There is a difference. Nicole's eyes glistened. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me. Thank you for being worth seeing. Nicole left. Adrienne turned back to the window. The last light of the sun was fading over the river, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. She thought about all the rooms she had walked into where people had looked at her and seen only what they expected to see. All the times she had been underestimated, dismissed, written off. All the energy she had poured into proving them wrong. And she thought about what she had built instead, not just a business empire, but a legacy of change, of second chances, of ordinary people discovering their own extraordinary courage. That was the real victory. Not the billions in her accounts, not the companies under her control, but the ripples that spread outward from every act of decency, every choice to do right, every moment when someone refused to look away. That was what lasted. That was what mattered. And that is the story of Adrienne Carlisle and the flight that changed everything. It is a reminder that true status is not about what you wear, the diamonds on your wrist, or the seat you demand. True status is about character. It is about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. Captain Hartwell and Victoria Pemberton made a fatal assumption. They looked at a black woman in a tracksuit and decided she was powerless. But the karma that found them was not magic. It was the direct, real-world consequence of their own arrogance. Adrienne did not curse them. She did not scream. She did not fight. She simply let their own actions speak for themselves. And in the end, she did not just hold the guilty accountable. She lifted up those who had shown courage in the face of fear. That is the real lesson here. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet person in seat 1A, waiting patiently, while others dig their own graves. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been underestimated, dismissed, told you did not belong somewhere you had every right to be? Drop your story in the comments. Let us build a community of people who know that patience and dignity will always outlast arrogance. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe to the channel for more stories where karma always finds its way home. Until next time, stay powerful, stay patient, and never let anyone else define where you belong.